Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Roman Lewis, Yale College Class of 1993. I'm the Senior Director for Shared Interest and Identity Groups at the Yale Alumni Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's Town Hall series. Today's program features guest speakers reflecting on their contributions to our Impact series and their personal efforts to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. Indeed, we've had a stellar turnout with faculty, staff, alumni, and students all contributing to make this a success. In just 1 week, we've had over 10,000 views. A big round of applause and thanks to everyone who helped make this series a success. We'll be sure to give shout outs later in the program. So even though we are live today virtually and coming from around the world, in this town hall, it is important to acknowledge the physical space in which our town resides. Yale University acknowledges that Indigenous peoples and nations, including Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotticoke, Golden Hill Pocasset, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac and other Algonquin-speaking peoples have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationship that exists between the peoples and nations and this land. And now I would like to welcome our first guest, coming directly from New Haven, Yale University President Peter Salovey.
And it's really quite wonderful to be here with so many Yale alumni and friends for this important conversation. I just want to say I'm grateful to Whaley and to the YAA organizers for inviting me to be part of this event. This is an exciting time for Yale. In spite of the challenges posed by the pandemic, we've been able to advance our priorities. We've been able to fulfill, in an adjusted way, Yale's mission. The events of the past year have reminded us again and again that diversity, equity, inclusion all must be at the center of our work. So to achieve our most ambitious plans for Yale, we have to collaborate, we have to work with each other, we have to learn from each other. We have to foster a university community where everyone feels a sense of belonging, where everyone can contribute. So last fall, I launched programs that are part of the next phase of the Belonging at Yale initiative. These programs delve into our history, assess and build on our current actions, support members of the university community, and create a stronger Yale for the future. They help us to continue to lead the way in teaching and research of the highest caliber. We design these programs based on the input from all members of the Yale community, including alumni. So alumni have long supported a more diverse and welcoming campus community here at Yale. The first Impact Conference, which was held in 2019, made clear that our alumni from across schools and generations are eager to engage with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Yale alumni want to have challenging conversations. They want to listen to different voices, and they want to act to make change in their communities. Impact 2 builds on the success of that inaugural conference. The speakers, panels, and workshops will challenge us to think deeply about a variety of issues. The Impact events are just one example of how we're asking alumni to be involved. The YAA has expanded mentorship and community building opportunities. It has connected alumni and students. The YAA is working with students and with recent graduates to build a strong alumni leadership pipeline. The YAA is looking for ways to facilitate alumni support, particularly of first generation and low-income students. All of these efforts, all of them bring us closer together as members of the Yale community. They'll make our university stronger and even more excellent. Well, past year has been challenging, to say the least. But as we look ahead, I must say I'm optimistic about Yale's future. In the face of global pandemic, widespread protest over police brutality and racial injustice, other tumultuous events, I've been inspired by our community's resilience, by its creativity, by its generosity. Our students, faculty, and staff have come together to sustain and advance research teaching and learning at Yale. Alumni have come forward to ask, how can we serve? And through it all, we have seen a renewed commitment to Yale's mission. So you, our alumni, you are a testament to this mission and its vital importance. I'm so grateful for your contributions and your engagement with our university. Thank you for being a part of Impact 2, and thank you for everything you do for Yale University, the university we all love. Thank you again, Nicholas and Whaley. Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today.
Peter, thank you so much for coming on. I know you're a very busy guy, and we really appreciate those words and your taking time to share with us. And please give Marta my love and tell her I said hello.
Thank you. And Marta says hello to all of you. Many of you know her and are good friends.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Take care.
Thank you. Be well.
So we heard from President Salve, and today I want to encourage you to be interactive, to use the chat function. But one thing I want you to do is to think of the Impact series as a call to action. We have a call to action for you that is very simple. All of our videos are on YouTube. YouTube has a function that's the share function. It's the little button in the lower right corner of each video. If you find value in any of the videos, if there is a particular video that educated you, that spoke to you, I want your call to action to be very simple. Push that share button, send it to a friend, send it to your family, start dialogues, have conversations. Literally making an impact could be as simple as clicking share. And on that note, I'm excited to welcome our next guest, but first, take a listen. So coming live to us from Berlin, Camilla, how are you? Welcome.
I'm great. Thank you so much, Nicholas.
So for those of you, if you have not had a chance to watch Camilla's performance in her video, you are in for something special. So Camilla, perhaps tell us a little bit about your impact journey and how your work reflects diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah, first, thank you so much, Nicholas, and everyone involved in Impact 2. I'm so thrilled to be here to share my experiences. So thank you for inviting me. So my name is Camilla Arku. I am a Norwegian Liberian pianist, educator, and I'm the director of nonprofit Music for Liberia. I'm currently based between London and Berlin, and I'm about to relocate to the States to start a musicology PhD at NYU. I'm also a very proud graduate of Yale from the class of 2005. So first of all, the piece you just heard was it was an excerpt of Florence Price's first Fantaisie Nègre. Florence Price is one of my favorite composers. She was a mixed-race American composer in the first half of the 20th century. She was acclaimed in her lifetime for being the first Black American woman to have a symphony premiered by a major US orchestra, but since then she's been largely forgotten. So only now are we rediscovering her amazing music, as well as celebrating her resourcefulness and creativity throughout her career. And what I admire in her most, and what I am discovering more and more, is just how resourceful she was. Whenever she was excluded from a cultural institution, she just started her own. And the reason she could enjoy such a prolific career is because she really created her own network of very talented Black creatives who created their own opportunities when they were denied them by cultural institutions at the time. For me, it's a very interesting time, a very strong kind of turning point in classical music. Throughout my education and my career, I've really witnessed a disinterest in music outside of the canon. So a disinterest in music by female composers, by composers of color. There's almost a denial that music can be racist, that the institutions can be sexist, that they can be political in any way. But like many branches of society, I find now that classical music is starting to take a look at the music that we've chosen to elevate and canonize. And we're realizing that history is full of these really fantastic composers who've been neglected, whose talents and achievements have been forgotten. So in my own work, I strive to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really at the heart of my journey as an artist. So as a pianist, this has meant exploring music by marginalized composers, which isn't always easy. For example, the piece that we just heard a little bit of, the Fantaisie Nègre, is published by a tiny publisher who has a volume of music by Black female composers. So to get a copy of the score, I had to contact the one pianist who I'd seen perform it on YouTube, and she helped me kind of track down the score. And this happens all the time, trying to find this music, because it hasn't been preserved in the same way as composers from the canon. Another example I thought of was my first performance on BBC Radio. So I was really excited to perform some works by one of my favorite African composers, Fred Onwaseke. I was gently steered towards playing Debussy, who was a composer who the host was more familiar with. So those are examples of kind of the gatekeeping that I find in classical music. So whether it's programmers or teachers, institutions, publishers, there's this idea that not all experiences and perspectives are valued in classical music, that there's really only one identity in classical music, and that identity is white and male. I don't think that this is what audiences want, in my experience, and I don't think this kind of thinking is going to help us use classical music to inspire and resonate with diverse audiences in the future. So in my performances, I really want to share the music that I'm passionate about, and I invite kind of fellow artists, institutions, schools, teachers to be part of this change. In addition to performing, though, I'm also a teacher, and I run a nonprofit called Music for Liberia. Music for Liberia raises money for children and education in Liberia through music-based fundraising in the UK. So in Liberia, this means supporting children in any way that we can. So it's scholarships, it's other kind of educational support and opportunities. It's empowering girls and women in a country with a very traumatic recent history. And then on the local level in London, it's really about engaging with non-traditional audiences. So it's bringing together diverse musicians and diverse audiences. So through Music for Liberia, I've been able to create the kind of events that I didn't see in classical music. with diverse artists, diverse communities coming to concerts. So having, Grammy-winning classical pianists with kind of innovative jazz musicians, choir players, other African bands and musicians, and they're playing for audiences that actually look like London, which is really important to me. And it's all in support of giving opportunities to very deserving children in Liberia. As a teacher myself, it's also my wish for my students to see themselves reflected in the music that they're engaging with. I want them to be able to express every part of themselves, of their experiences in this music, to feel that they can be a part of classical music. So with that idea, that led me to a lockdown project, which I launched in 2020, called the Every Voice Challenge. So with this project, I created a database of piano music by composers of color that I either collected or commissioned in some cases, and I invited students from all over to perform and explore this music. So that was kind of based on my experience as a performer, just not being able to track down some of this music. So I found that with my students, it's really hard to introduce them to color, to musicians of color, to female composers, to anyone outside of the canon. So it was an effort to combat that. We just had our first concerts, and I'm really looking forward to the next one. So it's been these kinds of projects, in addition to performing, that have really allowed me to share what I think kind of the true power of music is, which is bringing people together, which is creating dialogue, which is creating empathy. And then, this brings us back to Florence Price. So this is a year where she's being celebrated, where she's being recognized for all of her achievements. I think this is in light of the increased scrutiny on the arts to kind of embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as a genuine interest in introducing new music to audiences. It's something new. I think people really connect with this music that means so much to so many people. There's also a new edition of Florence Price coming out next year, so hopefully in the future things will change and it won't be so hard to find this wonderful music. But the question for me, it just remains, how will institutions, how will schools, how will arts organizations really nurture, support, and celebrate today's artists? So this is why I'm really excited to have been a part of this conference. So I really hope that Impact 2 will spark these conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my call to action for everyone listening is to go to a concert where you don't know the composer. See if you can find and listen to all of this music by these fantastic composers who have been forgotten. And with that, I'm very grateful to have been part of this event. Thank you so much for inviting me and letting me share my experiences.
I thank you. I just have one kind of question for you. So you said a few different things that struck me. So through you, some of us, I knew about Florence Price for very varied reasons, but one, because there's an amazing YouTube video of her work and that story of her. So the very fact that you are almost, it's somewhat of a mirror, not a younger version, because your story is going to be different than hers. But, this legacy, I guess that's the word. And I think, through what we're doing in Impact, just being able to show people, this is what's out here, like educate yourself. Did you not know about this? And the beauty about music is that it's like water. It can seep into places. It can, it can open up kind of dialogues that would be difficult to have otherwise. And particularly with your contribution to Impact, all we have to do is listen and open up our hearts. And so that's why I loved it. But you preach to the choir because I love classical music. So, but anyway.
No, that resonates with me. And I'll just share a comment I got after one of our first Music for Liberia concerts, which kind of echoes what you just said. This is the kind of concert I love. So we have music from Africa, we have jazz, we have classical music, just folk music. Basically anything that moves me, I put in the program. And someone came from the audience afterwards and said that in listening, she realized that music is all the same. She said not that it's literally all the same. It's obviously, very diverse and very very varied, but the idea of communication through music and it kind of bringing people together and just being self-expression. And there should be no barrier to that. And so now there is, but things are changing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank you for the work you're doing, and I look forward to seeing you in some far-flung place on this world and listening to music. Bye. Enjoy Berlin or maybe London. So the Alumni Association, we have several different opportunities for people to engage. In the description of this video, there are links to some of the latest initiatives that we are promoting, and we have a little commercial for you right now. So again, the links are in the descriptions to Yale Alumni College, our cross-campus, and the Yale International Alliance Common Rooms. And if you, without fail, if you go to alumni.yale.edu, you'll find them all. So last week, our workshop attendees spent time with our next guest, who shared with us the insights of telling a compelling story of self. Kathleen.
Nicholas, hello.
So I'm going to say it again. Your blue matches the blue of the background perfectly.
Thank you. I love a theme.
I know, you love a thing. So Kathleen, we really had a great time in your workshop last week. It was very interactive, and I think people really got a lot out of it. Could you just illuminate us a little bit more about the importance of your story and how that relates to our topic of diversity, equity, inclusion?
Yeah, so storytelling is super powerful in diversity, equity, inclusion. And there are a couple key reasons I want people to remember about telling their story, because it can be a little scary when we first start thinking about using our voices. And one is that you have to control your narrative. You want to make sure that your story is an option, and you want to contribute to the mosaic of reality. So should I explain those a little bit more?
Yeah, I love the mosaic of reality.
Yeah. So the mosaic of reality. So I'll hop back just a little bit. So controlling your narrative, you want to make sure that your truth is getting out as your truth. Mm-hmm. And then you would also want to make sure that your story is an option, because this is the fabulous TED Talk, the dangers of a single story. And if we don't have your story to choose, then we don't know that reality is possible. And so that brings us to the mosaic of reality, which is that all of these little pieces of information that we receive, they help us to create the story of our reality. So it's what I'm getting from the news, it's what I'm getting from social media, it's what my family is telling me, it is what I see people wearing on the street, what I experience in my own life, the media that I'm consuming. That is the mosaic. All of these different little pieces come together to create our reality. This is, transmedia is something that is a new category in awards now, because you have people whose jobs it is to take the film, the video game, the the merch
Exactly. Yeah.
and to make a whole story. And so it doesn't work just in entertainment. It actually works in our world as well.
Yeah. And so what I thought was really what resonated with me about the workshop was that the way we presented this and the kind of the overall narrative of impact is that we, you know, as Yale University, we're in the business of educating. We're not telling any one partisan or particular side of a story, but the goal is to make sure that people have the skills to tell their stories. One of the things I think you walked people through last week was the fact that it's compelling, right? And in a short amount of time, almost like your elevator pitch about yourself. Could you talk a little bit more about that and why that's like really in this climate, right, of untruths, what's true, facts, not facts, blah, 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 blah. You know, why just being able to have your story out there in an authentic way could be impactful?
Yeah, so the short answer is that when we are using storytelling, we're leveraging the power of neuroscience to engage people and to help them see the world the way we see it, to help them and help them to see us the way we see ourselves, which is a big part of DEI. And so when we receive pure data, one part of our brain lights up. When we receive a story, then literally like it's, you know, the vision part of your brain lights up because you are literally seeing the other person's story. Your hearing lights up. Your brain is firing all around because your brain is creating this reality. And that brings people closer together. And if we are going to try to convince people of climate change, of the need for systemic change, you know, all of these different things that are so desperately needed in our world, facts alone are not going to get us there.
Yeah, yeah. And so one story is ability to help people understand all of our stories. And the very first workshop that we had last week with Joyce Mercer, Professor Mercer, about listening was kind of the ground, the bedrock of it all, if you will. So Kathleen, is there anything else that you want to let us know about your work and why kind of this narrative, maybe companies you work for, or how we can, if we want to delve more into this telling our stories?
Yeah, so yes, please. So I love everybody's doing their call to action. My call to action for everybody from Impact 2 is to exercise your voice. So again, it can be a bit scary to start using our voice. And I think also a call to action, and I will share it. Thank you for the reminder. You can share YouTube videos. I'm looking down because I wrote it down. The impact story, Rebecca Walker and Lily Diamond's impact story. I loved that so much. I've listened to it twice. And I kept a notebook near me the second time because the first time I was listening to it doing dishes, and I kept thinking, oh, I want to write that. Oh, I want to write that down. But it's exercise your voice, get in there, start to figure out what is it that I want to say, what is my point of view, and listen. Start to become aware of what resonates in your body and what's real for you. Because the bonus of that is then we also start to filter out what is not authentic to us and what is not resonating with us. And it helps us filter out all of these different stories that people are throwing at us, some of which are fake and detrimental. And then thank you for bringing up the company I work for. So I create stories on my own as a filmmaker and as a storyteller. I also work with a company called S&P Communications, which I have to send a huge thank you out to, particularly my coworker, Charlie, who was in the workshop with us last week. They helped me create this. They let me use some of their worksheets. And there are companies like S&P Communications. I know there are other Yaleys who work for different leadership communications companies. So seek us out. We're here to help because it really, I'll show you. I don't know if you can see the what I have in my office is a sign that says "Change the world one conversation at a time," because I truly believe that that's possible.
Well, and in true Yale fashion, that was a very intense workshop last week. Um, I want to thank you, Kathleen. Hopefully when this storm passes, we'll be having lunch somewhere fabulous in the near future.
I hope so too. Look forward to it. Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you for including me. I'm so grateful.
Okay, you take care. So Kathleen's wonderful. I hope you can all take advantage of one of her workshops in the future. So our next two guests, and I've tried to be creative with my intro, so hopefully they work for you. Our next guests are giving new meaning to what it means to be bold. So Jeannie Daniels and Ivete Estepan. Jeannie, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. And Ivete, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're in it's an earlier end of the time zone for us. So can you tell our audience where you're calling in from today?
Yeah, I'm calling in from Honolulu, Hawaii.
Ooh, the nicer weather. Oh, I'm jealous. Okay, so to dive right into this, I just want to say that at the beginning of your impact story, you mentioned that Yale was really the first time you were allowed to have a space to have critical conversations about power and privilege and how they related to race, gender, and class. And I felt like that was a very powerful way for you to open your story. So with that in mind, I first want to ask, in terms of generational perspectives, as a young person, how do you think about advancing DE&I issues?
Yeah, so I guess like one of the biggest parts as a young person is always taking the baton from the generation that came before us, right? So I think one of the biggest responsibilities as a Yalie who, you know, is educated in history and also like in the world, right? It was the biggest point of affecting any type of change and affecting any type of work is understanding where you are beginning from and knowing that you're not beginning from zero. Right. And so when we're thinking about generational perspectives, we have to understand what our role as a generation is in context to what the previous generation did. Right. And that manifests itself at Yale in many ways. When we're thinking about like Calhoun College, like the 2015, 2016 protests weren't the first time that you saw people asking to change the name of Calhoun College. Right. Like that was happening in the 60s. It happened when it first went up. It happened in the 80s and 90s and all those things. So I guess when I think about like, just to really simply answer your question, it's really always like contextualizing our work in the generations before us and what we want for the generations to come after us. So I'm always trying to think about the world view, the world context, everyone's perspectives and how we think about what we're visualizing as change and as progress. So
I love how you're thinking back to think forward. That is exactly what I feel like needs to be done. So I'm sure many of us at home who watched the various My Impact stories noticed some common themes amongst our youngest storytellers. I know you and I talked a little bit about Nico's story and the connection and importance of creating community. So can you dig in a little to that as well?
Yeah, I think that to affect change, the most important thing is to have folks that are aligned with your views or that are able to push you to do better in all things that you carry out, right? And so that only comes, the best way to have that is in the form of community, right? That's going to uplift you when you need uplifting. That's also going to like be critical with you when you need to be criticized, right? And community is something that from the moment you step onto Yale's campus manifests, right? Like for me personally, you know, I joined CC Cultural Connections. So already it was like, I had all these kids that come from all different backgrounds, ready to just join together and be like a new community, right? And like have discussions, think about what these next 4 years are gonna look like. Then we have the residential colleges, which are also like another way of connecting folks and like, you know, creating a sense of like, solidarity, but also of like community, obviously. And then you have like, you know, general cultural centers, you have your majors, the social events, societies. And I think that like we focus so much on community because again, like changing systems that have existed for decades or hundreds of years, right, is not an easy feat, right? And so you need support from the folks that are not only support, but you need to join forces with folks that are going to be able to make the change a reality. And so community is what helps us do that, right? And community is what helps us to find solace when it gets too hard, which it's not always an easy feat to do DEI work or in general to just change the status quo, right? And so the younger generation right now, especially with the facility of technology and connecting through technology, right? It's like, it's just so easy to like really harness your communities and harness the histories and conversations of your communities to really move us forward and propel us forward. So that's a big thing. And I know that Nico really much talks about that when thinking about their trans transition and their trans journey at Yale and trying to find other people that are doing the same thing. And that's the same thing that was happening at Yale during my time, right? While there were protests happening at Yale, there was also protests happening at Mizzou and other colleges, and people were having conversations about taking statues down, renaming masters at Harvard, and all that stuff. So community that transcends boundaries is the way to actually change the world. So
that's excellent. Thank you. One last thing. So now that you have left campus and you've experienced the workforce, how can other young professionals advocate for their communities now?
I mean, I think that young professionals can advocate for the communities in many different forms. I think it's all dependent on the situations that they're in and the spaces that they exist, right? I think that no matter what role you have, no matter what you do or what you care about, there's always something to change to make it better, right? Because we are human and we are meant to always improve ourselves, right? So I guess the best ways are just like, taking a stand, forming relationships with folks and forming community with people who are aligned with what you're seeing needs to be changed in your jobs or like in whatever extracurriculars you might be involved in outside of your job in your professional world, and forming that community and really propelling a joint venture to change things, right? And to really start planting seeds for next generation. Because also the one thing that we need to know as young folks that we're very, what's the best word? We're very like anxious generation. We want things now, we want to see change now. And sometimes we have to realize that maybe the role for your generation is to just plant the seeds and the next one will reap what we sow, right? So that's having patience. Yeah. So having patience and just forming relationships and building solidarity in whatever change and whatever role that you are in is probably the best way to affect change, I think.
Thank you. This is awesome. There are a lot of great takeaways there. So thank you for this chat. It's really inspiring to see how this young generation's voice is really what's going to be moving the needle forward in terms of DEI. And it shows in the types of work that everybody's doing and what they're advocating for in terms of community beyond just their personal life. So thank you for being a part of this. We really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So thank you so much, Yvette and Jeannie. And I am looking to both of you to save the future in the world. So snap to it.
We'll see.
Okay. In 2 years, we'll come back with an update, right?
There you go.
For sure. Yeah, of course.
1 second. Thank you. So coming to us live from Beirut, an alumni volunteer who I've worked with in 6 different countries. Hello, George, Mr. Alumni.
Hi, Nicholas. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine. You're actually perfect. So let's first of all, before we get into your discussion, I have worked with you, and I was just counting it in my head when I was putting this together. We've done programs in 6 different countries, so we don't have a prize for the audience to figure it out. But we've been in the United States, London, which is UK, Paris, that was the European Leaders Forum, of course, Beirut for the launch of the Lebanese Alumni Association, Qatar, in Doha for the first or second Arab Alumni Association conference. And then
I think that's where our fun began, was actually in Doha, Qatar, in the year 2000, and if I remember correctly, was that 2011?
It was back then. And then we had a couple of programs in Dubai. So
in Dubai.
I've seen you in a few different places, and it's only fitting as a past chair of the Arab Alumni Association, the current president of the Yale Lebanese Alumni Association, and a current member of the Yale International Alliance board, that we have you here today. So George, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you. It's always difficult for me to do these live events. I'm not very used to them, but I'll try my best. And yes, you and I. And by the way, we missed Rome, but by a hair.
That's next time. It's coming.
That's next time. That's coming. That's coming. Well, I guess I want to begin by really saying thank you, Nicholas and YAA, for inviting me to take part in this Impact 2 conference. I arrived at Yale in 1987 at the height of the anti-apartheid movement. I'm not sure if there's anybody out there who remembers those days of shanty towns in front of the president's buildings. And one of the lessons that I took from that moment, that was a real moment of personal and political awakening for me, and it really made me think about Yale's mission, Yale's educational mission, and Yale's non-educational mission of serving our communities, not as something theoretical, but something that really needed to be executed. And so I guess I've been a kind of activist since, in my own way. I grew up in a Lebanese immigrant family. My family had originally settled in South America and eventually made its way to the United States when I was 11 years old. We settled in Connecticut, and they were fleeing a lot of that kind of political turmoil that one of your participants in the Representation and Power of Art panel, Saleh, who you know so well, spoke about when he spoke about the different conflicts afflicting the Levant, afflicting Beirut, afflicting Lebanon, and all of that, political turmoil, which is still with us today. So in a bit of historical irony, I moved to my parents' homeland and have been living in Beirut on and off for the past 20 years now. I like to think of myself as dividing my time between my real home, the United States, and Beirut, which is the city that I love. But the reality is that I've spent much more time here in what used to be called the Levant than I have in Connecticut in very recent years. But that's my personal story. I'll tell you that, I really owe it to a younger generation of Yalees who founded the Yale Arab Alumni Association in 2008. But I was honored to serve as a member of the board for 4 years, for 2 consecutive terms, with that particular alumni association. And we did much to bring Yale's name to the region. I saw such alumni activism as a way of making a small contribution, not only to building bridges between Yale and the Arab world, which were and I believe are still much needed, but also of taking those universal values of inclusion and equity globally, and of fostering them in various Arab capitals, including Beirut and, as you mentioned, Doha and Dubai, where we did some capacity building for non-governmental organizations, teaching them how to fundraise and how to friend raise, and to talk about the kind of like strategic importance of operations for NGOs. We did things such as lending some financial support to Yale undergraduates who wanted to come to the Arab world to study Arabic or to work on a project, or perhaps carry out a self-directed internship. We felt it was very important, as we brought Arab voices into the discussion about inclusivity and equity and diversity in the United States, that there be direct engagement with the region and not something that was mediated by our professors or by the media. And so we tried our best within certain limitations, of course, to bring some students here, and we were successful in doing that. I guess in the process, I aim to change the image of the Arab world among America's future leaders, those students who were coming from Yale, who would eventually assume positions in the State Department and the whatnot, by giving them that, that kind of live experience. Most recently, I and a group of fellow alumni launched the Yale Lebanese Alumni Association, as you mentioned, and of course you were here to celebrate the launch of that association with us. And we wanted to bring Lebanon's diverse Yale community together, and also to try to make a difference by using the knowledge and the leadership skills that Yale had equipped us with at this very difficult historical moment for Lebanon and this region. I don't know how many of you out there have been following the news, but these are really critical times for Lebanon. What with a pandemic that is that has been wreaking havoc on a country with very limited resources, with very limited medical and financial resources, but also multi-layered economic and social problems that are a direct result of mismanagement, of the self-interest of economic elites, and in my opinion, at the root of it all, a kind of a lack of a commitment to a society defined by, as the motto of the conference has it, equity, accountability, and inclusion. So it's as much an economic crisis as it is a crisis in values, I would say. And it's very much the same discussion that is taking place in the United States today. Of course, there was the massive explosion that destroyed a large part of Beirut on August 4th of last year. And Nicholas, you know very well that I survived that explosion and left a few days after that, kind of traumatized by the experience. It killed hundreds of people. It displaced thousands of people. And most importantly, and I think this is the invisible aspect to the crisis, it hurled Lebanese citizens into a sense of collective depression from which there doesn't seem to be any easy way out. And this event, too, is also unquestionably the direct result of poor governance and poor leadership. Until today, for example, political elites have not deemed it necessary to offer the public an official explanation for the blast, for example, and people continue to wait. I can't go into the complex, specific reasons for all of these crises, but I will say this: leadership matters, but not just any type of leadership. My personal mission as a Yale alumnus, as a board member of the Yale International Alliance and our own local club, has been emphatically to foster and nurture the new generation through educational empowerment. I'm a professor. I have been engaged with higher education in the Arab world for the last 12 years, 15 if you go back to the year 2000. And we do so through educational empowerment and a commitment to what some educators call the hidden curriculum, the importance of values and comportments that are enshrined in what Yale used to call the liberal tradition in education. To me, that means equity, that means inclusion, that means diversity. These are the antidote, as I see it, to many of the problems that we are experiencing in my corner of the world today, and which are going to be with us, I'm afraid, for years to come. When I was a freshman at Yale in 1987, we were told that Yale was in the business of graduating 1,000 American leaders a year. I would say that these changing times have made it imperative for Yale to promote 1,000 global leaders a year. This is more urgently the case as the world becomes more and not less interconnected. The recent rise of nationalism and that me-first mentality notwithstanding. But I guess each one of us international alumni in their own little way is advancing diversity and equity and inclusion. But I hope to see these efforts redoubled. I think I'm running out of time, so I want to say a warm thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to continuing this conversation at greater length in the future.
George, we really appreciate you. I know it's evening there, and you're always dealing with the power coming in.
Power cuts, no bandwidth, burning tires.
Well, we really appreciate it. And I think the whole note on leadership, again, I like to bring home, why are we as Yaleys with the gift of our education? It's not about being, yes, there are lots of great schools, so on and so forth in the world, but the notion of, shepherding leaders and with our alumni, engagement opportunities, what we can do. So I really appreciate your work. And I do want to say, George and I weren't just having fun in all those places. We were literally working as he's a volunteer.
We worked.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears to make those programs happen. So thank you, George. I will see you. Godspeed.
Thank you.
So our next two guests are both Yale Medal winners, and they were the co-chairs of the Yale Alumni Task Force on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion that ultimately launched the recommendation for a major DEI conference that we now know as Impact.
Hi, Nicholas.
How you
Hi,
doing?
Ken.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, thank you. So I would just like to welcome both of you. I'm hearing a little bit of glitch with the sound. I'm going to step out and allow you to give your remarks. What I would just like to say is that, as I think most of us know, you two were the leaders who were the founders of all of this. So I thank you for that, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Hi, Ken. This is thrilling having this event because it feels like an outgrowth of our work together. We did the task force, we led the task force of 50 volunteers, actually 25 on the task force and 25 advisory committee members who did a big study trying to advance DEI in New Haven at Yale, at our beloved university. And this feels like the embodiment of some of our recommendations, the conference, opportunity for young people to talk. What do you think?
Totally agree. And if I could just go back to 2016, or actually it was 2015, when the Halloween incident at Yale occurred. And I really have to give a hat tip to the moral leadership, really, of the Board of Governors at the time. Lisa Chapman, it was Lisa, Rahul Prasad, I think Pulin Sangvi was there, Kevin Winston, just a lot of insight from these leaders that commissioned the DEI task force. So I had to tip to them. And, one of the things that we focused on was we wanted to create a document that would last and would withstand the test of time. And if you look at the report now, in a way, it still reads very fresh because it really emphasizes action, committing to moral leadership, engaging in the younger generation, building community across the different Yale factions. Those are true back in 2015, 2017 when we delivered the report, and they're true 4 years later now in 2021.
Exactly. I give a hat tip to Nicholas as well, because he was involved with that Board of Governors deciding to take the action. It was a time of racial reckoning back then, kind of similar to what we're in now, but students were leading the way. So it's wonderful. And I just have to say that I had an opportunity to do some work with alum at Harvard recently who are organizing, and they told me they're using our report, Leadership in the Face of Change, as their starting point from determining what they should do in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion with their alum group too. So that was very inspiring. So happy to see it being used there as well as here, and hopefully in a lot of different places. What have you thought of Impact 2 so far?
Very impressed with it. I haven't been able to see all the videos, but I've seen perhaps most of them. I love the one with Miko McGinty and Nancy L. Mosbach. They talked about the Asian American experience, which, as we all know, is facing some trying times right now. But they talked about the parallel between the Asian experience and the Black and Brown experience. They talked about the parallel between reparations talk today with the redress movement for the Japanese Americans. So again, the wonderful thing about the Yale community is that it continues to evolve. And as crises happen, as voices need to be heard, we have people speaking up. And it's been very gratifying to see that.
It's wonderful. One of my favorite ones, and there's so many, they're like fingers, I can't choose the one that's most important, but one of my favorite ones so far, and I haven't watched them all, is the one with Bishop Michael Curry. He shared a quote that I think should lead us all as we continue to do this work. It's a quote from MLK, and he said, "We must discover the power of love, because when we do, we can make this old world a new world." And with DEI, we're always looking to change hearts and minds. So I think that remembering that love is what's going to bring us together and help us see the change that we want in this world is something we can keep in mind. So I'm inspired. And I think I want to thank Nicholas and YAA for continuing to hold these conferences. The work that's being done is incredible. The sessions have been wonderful.
That's right. And just if I could add one last note, and that is, whenever there's a struggle, silence is endorsement. We have to speak out. And
Absolutely.
those of us that have the privilege of a Yale education, it's really incumbent upon us to use our education as a platform. And what Nicholas has done in providing a forum, a platform to amplify voices, the voices that he's invited to speak. Nicholas, thank you so much for what you've done in creating this series.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both, Ken and Cheryl. I look up to you, and as many Yaleys do, particularly our volunteers. You're stellar leaders and are always there. And so we thank you. And again, I look forward to hanging out with you outside of this screen. So
thank you. Bye-bye.
So yeah, they're great. So our next guest doesn't need an introduction, but I will give her one. She's the executive director of the Yale Alumni Association. Hi, Whaley.
Hi, Nicholas, and hello to all of you out there. As Nicholas said, I am the executive director of the Yale Alumni Association. A few years ago, the Alumni Association conducted a survey of all alumni, and we asked alumni about program preferences. The results showed definitively that the top interest among Yale alumni is learning. And that's what the Impact 2 series is all about. The Impact 2 series is an opportunity to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion, including the experiences and histories of marginalized people. I have not yet finished viewing all of the Impact 2 videos. And so far, like Cheryl, I am personally inspired by Bishop Michael Curry's message of love and faith. It is my faith that sustains me, especially at this moment in time. Now is the time when many of us feel the loss and trauma of the pandemic and the violence. These feelings are more acute because of our social distancing and lack of physical contact. Bishop Curry's message is that these times call for love for ourselves and for each other. I hope you have a chance to watch his message and the other sessions in this series. I now have 2 requests of you. The first is to please join me in continuing to learn about these topics. The second is what Nicholas had mentioned previously. Please share at least one video from this series with your friends and family. Our learning from this series can open a dialogue about these difficult issues. Doing so will have an impact with love. I want to thank you for joining this town hall and for watching the Impact 2 sessions. I want to thank all the speakers and workshop leaders that we have featured. And I want to give a big thank you to the YAA staff that helped to plan this program. Nicholas Roman Lewis, Lauren Summers, Mindy Marks, Jeannie Daniels, Michelle Raza, and Jennifer Julier. Because I know you're interested in learning, I want you to go to alumni.yale.edu, alumni.yale.edu, and click on the tab in the upper right-hand corner labeled Learn. One thing that might be of particular interest to you is the free virtual learning program on Yale Alumni Academy. It's called Civil Rights from Reconstruction to Right Now. At alumni.yale.edu, you will find a wealth of learning opportunities.
Thank you, Whaley. I really appreciate that. And so I'm going to close it out. I have some just some final remarks. I can't thank everyone enough for all the work that has gone into producing the Impact series. So for those of you who don't know, our whole goal was to take away the element of time and to create a resource similar to a Netflix series that people would be able to binge, and it would not just be a couple days, but this is a resource that you can go back to, refresh, send out to friends, have continuing conversations. So I thank everyone. I also want to give my personal shout out to the extended team of individuals who worked on the Impact series. A huge shout out to our associate producer, Michelle Raza, for late nights and early mornings and dealing with everything that I said, hey, let's do this. So our production team, Whaley Chang, as she said, Jeannie Daniel, Jennifer Julier, Henry Kwan, Mindy Marks, Lauren Summers, our communications team, EJ Crawford, Aaron Roberts, and Carissa Violante. Also, a big shout out to Julia Ma of Miko McGinty Company, who did our program, and to M30A Films, who did all of the video editing. So last week, I had the privilege of sitting in on a workshop with Patty Russo on how to run for office. And she closed her workshop with words that were so poignant that I thought I would repeat them today. It is a poem called With Intention by L.R. Nost. Do not be dismayed by the brokenness of the world. All things break, and all things can be mended, not with time, but with intention. So go, lead intentionally, love intentionally. The broken world waits in the darkness for the light that is you. So once again, thank you and have a great day. And please enjoy the rest of our Impact series.